Hi, we're here in our lesson about getting to know you, and today's learning target is that I can identify a protagonist and an antagonist. Now let's take a step back. These terms have to do with characters, and as a quick refresher, it's basically any of the individuals that are involved in and influence the event, the who of a story. So it could be any kind of creature, character, whatever. But there are two major types of characters. The first one we're going to talk about are protagonists. These are the leading characters or one of the major characters in any kind of story. These are usually kind of like the good guys, the people that we're rooting for, in other words, kind of the hero of the story. They're the people that the story is centered around and are leading all of the actions. Now, we can actually break this down even more. Two protagonist types. We do have that hero, that classic superhero kind of person, basically the person who's trying to do all the right things. But not everything is what it seems, because we also have what we call an anti-hero. These are often characters that kind of become the leading characters, not because they choose to, but because situation forces them to, and they're usually not always the best hero. I mean, think of Shrek. He's a leading character. He's not a bad guy. He's not a good guy, but he's not really going out to be the hero. We also have a villain. A villain can be a protagonist. If they are the one who's leading and deciding the events of a plot, they are the protagonist. Think the Grinch. Now, we know he does turn into the good guy and kind of becomes a hero at the end, but for the majority of the story, he is the villain. But the story is centered around him. It is his story, so he is the protagonist of this. Now, I know it's a lot of words, so I'm going to go back, and if you miss anything, go ahead and take some notes on this that you feel you need. Pause the video if you need to. And we're going to move on to the second type of character. The second type of character is actually an antagonist. So these words are very similar. So keep in mind, protagonist, pro usually means positive or like we're going for that person. And antagonist, that ANT usually means against. So an antagonist is the opponent of a main character, someone who gets in their way, is trying to stop them. We have our classic bad guys, antagonists from all our Disney films here. So often it feels like they are very, very easy to identify. However, we've got a lot of categories of these as well. So our antagonist types, we're actually going to start with our villain again. This is our classic person, just being the bad guy, getting in the way on purpose, like Voldemort. Just a classic bad guy. We also have a conflict creator. So it's not somebody who's intentionally being bad and intentionally getting in the way. They just have different goals and it's causing problems. Like when Buzz Lightyear first came into Toy Story, he was not trying to go against Woody and the other toys, but who he is and what his goals were and what he understood was getting in the way of Woody's goals. And so he was the protagonist, just not an evil one. The protagonist can actually be their own antagonist too. If we think of Carl from Up, he was pretty much getting in his own way. He was very set in his ways. He had issues. He was not willing to let go of things. And he was the one causing his own problems by not changing and being stuck. So sometimes when you're looking at the problem, you're going to say, oh, they're actually kind of fighting against themselves, possibly because they have different things they want. Now, these aren't the only kinds. Sometimes an antagonist could be nature, like you're caught in a storm and that's what's causing the problem. Or like your car is breaking, and so now the car is your antagonist. Or if you have like a scary supernatural type thing, like a ghost that's not really in control, but there's just something there. So antagonist is a little more open, but again, it's whoever or whatever is getting in the way of the protagonist, like reaching their goals. So here's our real quick overview if you want to go back and check anything. And now we're going to check out an example. So here's our For the Birds, and we have our big blue bird and our little chirpy angry birds. And when we really stop and look at who is driving the story, the protagonist is really the one kind of driving the story in this sense, because this bird is the one who's really trying to, he has a goal. He has the I want to be friends with you and get along with you and hang out with you goal. And he's perfectly happy-go-lucky. So he is a hero type of protagonist because he's just trying to do the right thing. He's just trying to be nice and kind and friendly. Whereas here, our chirpy little birds are antagonists, and they are more villains because they just don't want him to be doing his thing, and they're actually intentionally mean and try to get in his way. Now, I guess we could potentially flip this and say the little birds are actually the protagonists, but villain protagonists, and that the other big bird could be the antagonist and be kind of like just a random character kind of thing, like the conflict creator. So in this case, because it's such a short one, it's hard to tell, but I prefer to go this way. Most of them, you will be able to tell who your main leading protagonist is. It's usually the character that has some kind of problem they're trying to overcome. So there you go for protagonists and antagonists and all the different types.